Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Vader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hey folks, Jason here. In this episode, I had the opportunity to catch up with Casey Winans. Casey is the CEO of Fullstride, and Fullstride focuses on warehouse management systems, lasers and phasers out in your warehouse, barcode scanning, that whole world. Something that I've been around for, a vast majority of my career. I really have enjoyed this. And I always tell people it's not an if thing, it's a when thing in wholesale distribution. It's just, and other people will ask, gosh, is it only for the big kids? And that couldn't be further from the truth. I've seen so many companies, doing less than $10 million in revenue that have employed this kind of technology to improve their operations in the warehouse. Well, Casey is obviously an expert in this, but I think what I really like about Casey's approach is he's not really, diving on the tech side and saying, so focused on, the gun and the barcode, all that kind of stuff, where he is niche really falls is the getting ready for one of these systems, because it is a cultural change moving from a paper-based manual picking, put away warehouse function to this, more automated function using this WMS technology. And so a lot of companies get themselves in trouble because they don't plan right, and they put the cart before the horse, and they get really frustrated with these systems. And that's probably due to really not slowing down and asking questions first. And that's really where Casey comes in. His expertise is looking at, all right, well, first of all, what are you all trying to accomplish? Here's how we want to get ready for it. And this is long before you cut the PO to whoever the supplier is that you're going to use. But the pre-planning is really the thing that I think gives Casey his superpowers. So thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with him, and I hope you all do too. This episode is brought to you by Connected Peers, an online peer collaboration platform for distribution professionals. Let's face it, most managers don't have the opportunity to speak with their industry peers about common challenges in their departments. Sure, they might see each other at an annual conference, but that hardly provides any real relationship building or continuity. What if there was a forum to solve challenges with those in your same role? Well, now there is. The concept is simple. Purchasing managers meeting with purchasing managers, training managers meeting with training managers, marketing managers meeting with marketing managers. You get the idea. There are 10 unique role-based communities to choose from. These are monthly, facilitated meetings, all via Zoom. Ask questions and receive feedback from people who understand the challenges of your position. Isn't it time that you quit going it alone? To learn more and find your peers, visit us at www.connectedpeers.com. All right. Hey, Casey, welcome to Distribution Talk. So glad you were able to make it.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you're kind of involved with, one of my favorite subjects here, and I've been around this a lot of my career. So take it away. Tell me a little bit about how you got involved with the warehouse management system world, and what got you interested in this stuff in the beginning.
So I came out of high school. I thought I was going to be an electrical engineer.
Okay.
We did some class in high school where we were picking professions, and it intrigued me a bit, right? There was the curiosity piece that captivated me. But pretty early on in college, I changed majors to computer engineering. The whole concept of computers and software was foreign to me. I grew up blue collar family. This is the late 90s. So literally, I got my first computer for college. Cell phone. I got my first cell phone in college.
It's fascinating, isn't it? You look back and you're like, oh, these things, they appear on your desk now. It's part of a way of life. But back then, not at all. I was in college in the late 80s, and Mac was kind of coming out. And I've been programming since, the Apple IIe when I was in 8th grade.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
It's a long time ago.
Math class. We did some very, very basic programming.
Sure.
I didn't necessarily know what I was doing at that point, connecting the dots, but later on. Yeah. So I loved the idea of building logic. What I didn't like about that was the pace. It took a very long time to get anything you could see. And then I remember going through examples of logic flows we'd build, and then the professor would break the news that what you're building right here, happens, there's like millions of these in a typical processor. And I'm like, well, wow, like, am I ever going to like get done or see something? And right about that time, my advisor said, well, there's this concept of computer science. So I went towards that with like a management information systems component of it, because that was the major at the college I was going to, but there was a lot of overlap. So that got me into software, and then my eyes were wide open. I could create something very quickly, and my creativity had an outlet in a new way that I had never experienced before.
That's a great point. Yeah. I mean, it can get very frustrating, lines and lines and lines of code for nothing. I mean, it has to be there, but yeah. No, that makes sense.
It's just painstaking on the hardware side. I fully appreciate the folks that do that.
Sure.
There's software out there to automate a lot of that, but in college, you're doing the basics and you're learning the fundamentals. It just takes too long for me to see some fruits. And the computer side, the software engineering side, computer science, whatever you have it, software engineering wasn't necessarily a term while I was in school. That came a little later. Mm-hmm. But the way I was defined it was I was interacting with a lot of different programming languages, a lot of different components going into a solution. So there's the engineering aspect of it, of connecting all the dots. So I got my first internship at GE.
Okay.
Transportation systems. They built locomotives. I was in the e-business side of it, which that used to be like anything that was web related early on. And I built lots of systems that helped with fleet management, fleet maintenance of these locomotives, the maintenance regiments. And then I moved on from there to work for a small company that built their own warehouse management system internally, and along with like parcel manifesting. And I'm building these systems in house. So they're, they have one customer effectively, but there's a lot of surface area to them. And all the while, I had no idea I was in supply chain. That concept, that term didn't exist to me. I was I was a software engineer of some sorts, doing that, building systems. And it wasn't until probably about almost 6 years into my career when I moved to North Carolina to work for a company called Red Prairie. It's now Blue Yonder. So big, supply chain company, software. And that's when I discovered this concept of supply chain. And I realized, I'm like, well, I've been in it throughout my career already.
Sure.
There's lots of things here that I took for granted or didn't appreciate the domain knowledge that I was picking up.
So that first program that you were kind of putting together, and you didn't really know what you were doing, but what was the purpose? The purpose explained to you.
So back to the GE.
Yeah.
So it was making sure that they maintained the equipment. These are massively expensive locomotives.
Sure.
And they're in service all over the Americas. So you're talking Canada, the US, and then down through Latin America, Central America, where there's a whole bunch of different countries. And they need to be brought out of service. It's periodic times, brought back into facilities or some other satellite operations, and make sure that all the aspects of them are taken care of. And managing that fleet, and there's big companies out there that have many dozens, maybe hundreds, I have no idea the numbers of these locomotives. It's a very complex network. I think you can probably appreciate the fact that like carrier networks with trucks in the US, taking them in and out wherever they happen to be at that moment, and then facilitating getting them in so they stay operational.
Yeah. When I think about purpose, I mean, was the process of keeping them on the road and having the products available for repair, was it just exceedingly slow? And that's why they said, hey, there's got to be a better way?
Gotcha. So it's coming from the angle. This was all originally on green screens, old mainframe Oracle systems. And it wasn't something they could actually put out in the field very easily, or if they needed to make changes, they were slow.
Gotcha.
So that's the advent, like the web was more prevalent. Browsers were more prevalent. Internet was, and now they could build something very quickly and rapidly iterate on it and get some better features out to the market. And they could put those on laptops, like small laptops, and take them anywhere.
Gotcha. So I digress. I pulled you off in another direction. Let's go back on the, you're heading into your WMS journey.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So getting into that, I now wasn't necessarily writing software anymore. I did some aspect of that, more like customizations or integration glue layer software. But what I was learning was how to interact with a whole different set of clients. Lots of big companies. The smaller ones were probably somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 300, 400 million at the bottom of their market. And those are the ones that struggled a bit. But learning how to communicate with them in a way where I could take business requirements and then translate that into what the software would do and find the gaps and help fix that. And the experience I'd had before let me know, or like basically kind of guided my hand in a lot of ways, because I was familiar with concepts that I didn't appreciate. I'd had exposure to some of them, and especially on the parcel manifesting side.
Okay.
So all the little soft things that happen behind the scenes with, say, like a UPS, how they operate, all that stuff set me up for a whole lot of success during my 5 years or so at Red Prairie, to the point where I became the parcel guy for the last couple of years. Had a team, moved into management at that point. That facilitated a whole bunch more stuff in my career afterwards. But during that time, I got to see how people used the software in very, very big facilities. A lot of times on the order of magnitude of, like, say, a million square feet. I've had bigger. You got down to the smaller ones that might have been like 250,000 square feet. A lot of just diverse experience.
Sure. It's funny, Casey, I was just kind of laughing about, you're the parcel guy. Isn't it funny how we get kind of pigeonholed into these certain things throughout our career? For a long time, I was the inventory guy. And now I do some branch management work. So I'm the branch manager guy. And it's just kind of funny how you do get these labels.
That was the catalyst for me effectively moving on, was like, once I got so good in a certain area, it was hard to get out of it. And it was like, oh, I'm not growing here necessarily, or the next evolution would be something that I didn't want to do, which was much more administrative at that point. And I'm like, well, there's things I want to learn, I want to grow. And so I followed an old mentor to a Canadian 3PL. And that gave me the ability to kind of see it from outside the vendor's perspective and capitalize on what I had learned.
Could you explain the 3PL concept? How does that differ from wholesale distribution?
Sure. So third-party logistics. And it breaks down into, I guess, two different ways. But you have outsourced labor for the warehouse, or you have outsourced infrastructure where someone else takes care of your inventory. Most of the time we see it where it's inventory is outsourced to another facility and they provide the labor. Very, very common model across the space, a whole bunch of industries that way. And you get into really big vendors, providers in that sense, like a DHL. They're like the biggest one in the US. So operate, I don't know how many millions of square feet of facilities and, across every state and throughout the world. Effectively, if it's not your bread and butter in terms of managing inventory and all that, you can go out there and you can bid on these 3PL providers, and they can take care of the fulfillment aspect of it. They bring the inventory in, manage it while it's there, and fulfill your customer orders. And you don't necessarily have to do the physical aspect of all that.
Yeah, basically fulfill that side of the transaction. Yeah, for a long time, I believed that manufacturers were really the only clients of these 3PLs, and it was basically for geographic distribution. And then I started to realize that some of my distribution clients decided that they were going to use them as well. So yeah, it's a very moldable model. I mean, it's in a lot of different aspects.
For sure. Yeah.
And I think sometimes we think about, they have to be really big, like the ones you've described. But I mean, I know little operations, a friend of mine, he converted his warehouse into a small 3PL, and, it worked out famously for him. Frankly, got him through a recession.
I mean, I've worked with some recently that are very much on the small side. And especially with the e-commerce picking up, you have a lot of small ones that are very niche, working in certain pieces, maybe geographical, maybe it's a certain type of expertise in that product line.
Sure.
You see a lot of that. So it's a pretty fragmented industry. You have the big boys, but then you have a whole ton of them that are out there that are very niche and specialized.
Yeah. And I think the pricing model is really fascinating. It's, I move this from from this bin location to another one, I'm going to charge you. I mean, it's really an interesting pricing model. But anyway, jumping back in. Okay. So you got into working in the 3PL and the WMS world. This is really where you kind of really got involved with that and cutting your teeth there. What did you learn about, these systems?
Well, just before that, I would like to say that 3PL world, in a lot of ways, allowed me to share my expertise in a way where I wasn't necessarily towing the party line for the vendor. Yeah. There's design decisions, there's design flaws. And when you work for them, you basically got to take all the criticism on the chin, So
yeah, for sure.
I could roll away from those punches at that point, and I could have concrete conversations. I did that for a year and a half, and I moved on, starting another business. What I was seeing along these lines is, in a very, I guess, broad sense, they viewed this technology as a technology project. And if I could say anything in terms of just looking at patterns, that's almost never the case. Technology plays a part. I mean, it does. It's an important part, but it comes last effectively. If you don't have people across different teams, and that's not just the four walls, that's like sales, purchasing, customer service. I mean, there's a whole lot more there too, depending on the type of business. If you don't have them all aligned, it doesn't matter how good the technology is.
Mhm.
It's just going to amplify your problems if you have ineffective processes. So, I mean, one of the things there, it's like if you get the people talking, that'll inform your processes. And then once you have your processes, now you can use the technology to get the mileage out of your operation that you're looking for. That's something I've been seeing over and over again for my whole career. Not until recently that I really kind of put that together, I guess.
Yeah, I think most of the time when I see people, clients looking at this type of technology, they, throw it into the IT bucket. It's a technology. I know that makes perfect sense, but really there's a whole lot of orchestration that has to come before that, before you even start looking at it.
For
So,
the very big
yeah,
companies that I worked with early on, it was very much an IT project.
yeah,
And I think that was part of the reason why so many of them struggled, because if it's technology, you have IT, they're the ones with the final say. And then you have operations and IT fighting each other because something's pushed at them versus them opting into it and then working through
right.
getting a good alignment there. That was just something that you always saw. And I didn't necessarily appreciate that because early on, I was on the IT side. I was the software vendor. That was the role I had to play.
This episode of Distribution Talk is sponsored by InSQL Distribution Software. InSQL is a fully functional distribution-based software package. I say distribution-based because that's important. Many alternatives out there say they do distribution, but they really aren't very good at it. They're generally watered-down manufacturing packages with a few distribution features tacked on. I only recommend software packages that were purpose-built to serve distribution, and these folks do it very well at a price point many smaller distributors can afford. If you're ready to step up to a fully loaded, scalable distribution package at an affordable price, look no further than InSQL Distribution Software at www.insql.com. That's INXSQL.com. So now you're spending a good amount of time helping people move away from this is a technology project mentality, and you're moving it more into, hey, we got to talk a little bit before this. Tell me some of the biggest challenges that you run up against, and really any company runs up against when they go, besides throwing it in the IT bucket and expecting them to work it out. What else have you run into that really knocks these things around, these implementations around a little bit?
I could start with the idea that we always see the best in our businesses. So
Mm-hmm.
if someone's going to ask you, are your processes well defined? The gut answer is, yeah, they are, right? Like we don't know what we don't know. We're so close to it. We see how it works. We don't necessarily see all the gaps and all the ugly stuff that lies behind it. One of those realizations there is vendor won't slow you down and ask those hard questions necessarily because they're not geared to fixing them for you. There's an assumption there that you've already done the homework. Your people are on board, and that's going to be something you own. But they don't bring that up explicitly. It's just this assumption that kind of goes unsaid.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can buy, and then that's when the painful reality sets in. You get into the design phase, and vendor will ask you a question. And instead of getting one answer like you're expecting, you get your team, and then there's like 4 or 5 out there, some number more than one. And then it's the pause, step back, like, okay, well, now we get to consensus. And that's right there. That's the very beginning of this implementation. And now we're off to the point where there's a potential for being derailed.
Yeah,
because now we have to invest in time and get clarity there where we thought we had it. And now the clock's ticking, the clock's running, you've already spent this, you have a budget,
the bills are paying. Yeah. The bill's there, you gotta
do we dig in or do we push in terms of like, we're just going to mandate how we do something like that? And then those issues stack up and you give it enough that will derail the whole project, or you'll get to go live and your business grinds to a halt. And that's like the worst case scenario. But I've seen it happen many times, unfortunately.
Oh, I have too. I mean, and this is even going back a couple of decades. I've seen this happen where, a software implementation, like this can literally cause a manufacturer not to be able to ship for months.
All right.
I mean, months.
Oh, yeah. You see all this, the headlines, right? ERP systems get the headlines in terms of the failures and the limelight in terms of what to watch out for. I get that because that's effectively that can kneecap the whole entire business. But if you're a distributor or somebody else who your bread and butter is moving inventory, right then and there, it's almost like the same kind of problem, but it doesn't necessarily get the mind share out there in the media and wherever else in terms of like, watch these things, prevent, do these things first.
So one of the things, Casey, that I ran into, and again, I got involved with this stuff with WMS. mid 90s, so 95. We're bleeding edge people, just, really have barcode gun will travel. It was,
Nice.
it was tough, man. It was pretty bad, and there's a whole lot of blame to go around on why that was difficult. But maybe could you talk about the fear of technology? Some of the people who have been doing things, a certain way for a very long time, and then all of a sudden this gets thrust upon them.
And I see this a lot, the disconnect between leadership and the front line.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of the fear of technology is it's the basic question of, why do I have to change? This works for me. Right. So there's the lack of communication tying business goals to what happens inside the four walls. And I think that's a huge missed opportunity. I wish I could say it's not common. I mean, it's very common. It's the opposite. It's communication there. There's an old adage, when you think you're communicating too much, you're barely meeting like the minimum threshold for communication. And that's where a lot of this comes from. I think, in my opinion, is the pushback when you get someone who's like, I don't want to change. I'm scared of it. I know my job. What happens now? Like, I'm very happy in what I do today, and I've optimized around it. I know what I'm doing when I come in. I don't have to guess. I don't have to relearn. You'll see a fairly decent chunk of people that will, at that point, kind of opt out. Like, nope, I'm not ready for change, or I had a bad experience in the past. I'm not doing it again. I'm out, retire, move on to a new job,
sure,
whatever may have you. But yeah, it's the overwhelming sense of just the fear of change in general, all the uncertainty around there. And I think the communication could go a long ways in terms of letting them know what it looks like, bringing them in early, showing them how it would work. It's not so scary, right? There's a new device. I've been in places, and this is like a little bit of a tangent, but folks being given a computer mouse, first time, go live, and they don't even know how to do that. I can't imagine the scariness of the whole situation right there, where like, I'm not a technology person at all. That was back when we had flip phones. So I can just imagine, like, it just in general, right? I get through my whole life without technology, and then now I have to use it at work. And what happens when things go wrong? And it just, the fear kind of just goes crazy. But those are the kinds of things where there's lessons to be learned there. They could have been pulled in, more training. I'm guessing it was missing in that one. I wasn't privy to it. I mean, if it happens once, it's probably going to happen pretty common. But bringing them in and explaining to them how their job's going to change and why it needs to change. They can connect the dots to, we're trying to achieve this as a business. Now I know my efforts are valuable too, and I can get behind it. I know why it has to change versus just someone pushing it on me and it's cruel, it's mean.
Yeah, I would say, Casey, that one of the greatest common denominators there, whenever you see a failed implementation or initiative, doesn't really matter if it's technology or not, but the failure is not tying this to a purpose. What is the purpose of doing this? Because as you said, they've been going along, they've been doing something, and they've been doing it well for a long time. So what is the purpose of changing? And I think that's where the biggest breakdown is. Leadership cannot explain the purpose. And if they can't articulate the purpose, then yes, there's going to be fear, misunderstanding, and all of these things. And then, as you said, rebellion, just pushback. They're not going to do it. Is something that leadership could really spend some time on, is understanding, how do they explain the purpose? How is this going to make it better? How is this going to make your life better?
Yeah.
Because, people are individuals. But I agree with you. I think that is a huge component there.
Another avenue that I just thought of, we were talking through this, is when you scare people, they're less likely to participate in general, right? Opt out completely. So there's the adversarial kind of notion there, but there's also, if they're checked out, they're not sharing those critical tidbits that would be huge when it comes to day one, go live, and you get in there and you hit a corner case that they could have been sharing information about, maybe helping you flesh out the process and the whole workflow in general, and you get blindsided, right? But at that point, I've seen some negative scenarios where that's where finger pointing starts. And I knew this was a bad idea, but it comes down to the communication piece overall.
Yeah, as you mentioned earlier in our conversation, it is way before you sign the check for the software or the WMS, the system. If you can spend an inordinate amount of time on that communication piece and planning this thing out, you have a good chance of actually getting a return on this investment.
Right. And that's a big part of what I do.
Yeah.
What I see over and over again, especially in like the warehouse management system realm, is there's some external event that's causing urgency. And then now the business has to jump. By default, there's going to be assumptions that go unchecked. That's the painful part that gets there. So you were talking about preparation. And that's the big overarching concept right here, that if you prepare, you're going to be set up for success. And
Yeah.
when you don't, there's all kinds of things that can go sideways. I think there's stats out there that roughly like 85% struggle. And that could be a component of just missing budget, timeline, some certain features, all the way to outright failure where we just cut our losses and pause, put the software on the shelf and wait for the contract to expire. And I mean, those things happen every day. Sad.
Sure. Yeah. What is that? If you fail to prepare, you're preparing to fail or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, more or
Yeah.
less. That's the scary part there. And everyone sees in hindsight, but
Yeah.
hindsight's a brutal teacher. I would love
Trust
for
me. I
everyone to
learned
avoid.
my best lessons from getting kicked in the teeth and go,
Yeah,
yeah, I probably should have done that a little differently. So if you could just share a little bit, about, kind of when you work with a client, that ready, set, go. I mean, obviously there's a lot of preparation. Could you talk a little bit about that ready, set, go and,
sure.
getting somebody ready for this?
Right. I mean, everything we do in particular, we call it clarity first. It's an on-site assessment. It doesn't have to be long, but it has to be methodically thought through. We do things from shipping all the way forward to receiving because we're looking for what are the critical must-haves and then layering that on each step forward till we get to the point where we have like a pretty good understanding of the operation. And what we discover there effectively is what do you really need to have in a system? Where are there bottlenecks, opportunities? We work on all those pieces there, and that will inform what you need to do next. And that definitely is not talking to the vendor, not yet. Right? There's a lot of homework involved here. And this is the part where if you want to succeed, you're going to prioritize this. You're going to do these things, whether it's you're going through your warehouse and it's painful today and you want something in there. But it's better to do this work now than force something in. And now you have another type of pain, maybe even way worse because you're fighting a rigid workflow that doesn't cut the mustard, right? So we really focus on that aspect of things, getting them ideas and an action plan for what do we have to do to get ready for the conversation? How do we talk to vendors? The questions, the requirements that we really need. The operation itself isn't necessarily all that special. About 80% of what goes on there, everyone else does.
Yeah, for sure.
You're looking for that 20%, right? So, which means it's not going to nearly be as custom or special as it needs to be at the end, right? So you whittle that down to, I don't need to necessarily go to a vendor for all the basic features, right? Most of them have those. There's the bigger pieces, that critical part that you need to focus on. Can they do it? Can they not? How would they approach it, given them some requirements there? So we work through a lot of that as well. And then the other side of it really, especially in the mid-sized space, is this concept of program management, project management. I say program because there's usually a lot of moving pieces. So it's a series of projects. But you try to do it internal. The mid-sized ones do, right? Someone's already wearing a bunch of hats. They either volunteer or they're told to put on another hat. And their day job takes priority. So trying to push this thing forward part-time, never done it before. Things always fall off, right? That's where time kind of kicks you hard. You're not making the progress. One of the aspects I do and I've discovered through all this work over the years is if you focus on that and you get someone that's independent and external, they can do things that the folks inside can't necessarily, or they get very uncomfortable with because you know what? They're going to be working with everybody else for a very long time. I can come in and out. I can have objectively productive conversations, ask hard questions and get the business moving. But the other part of this really is speaking business and technology, that translation layer, because a lot of the times what I've seen is the feature requirements are skin deep, right? Surface level, lot management. Oh yeah, we support lot management, but you didn't ask those detailed questions there that really get into it. I work with food and beverage folks as well. And there's a lot around that.
That's a lot. That's a fast moving deal there.
If you have a bunch of different warehouses and you're doing transfers to rebalance inventory, there's a lot of technical complexity there that you may not have today with an ERP. You can click a button and it just like sucks inventory out and spits it back into another one. And like you do all the physical stuff, but you didn't have to deal with barcodes or whatever else.
Right. There's a whole lot of steps inside there that you can mess up. So
yeah, you go to the warehouse management system world where barcoding typically is like a first class citizen.
Yes.
There's a lot of work right there that has to explicitly be done. And if you don't factor that in, it can be crushing from a labor perspective. There's a lot of these things that like an independent client advocate can bring up and talk to the integrators and get that all moving so the budget and the timeline are preserved. And the reason I bring that up is, like I said, someone will either volunteer for it or be told to do it. It's done part-time, or sometimes it's just not filled at all. The vendor's supposed to do it. And that's where a lot of these go off the rails. So investing in that component of it so someone can sit in the middle and make sure all the pieces are moving forward is a big part of real success.
That makes a lot of sense, Casey. I mean, again, I think back to, the implementation years and years ago where we didn't have that advocate in the middle. And so it was a bunch of people doing it part-time and having quasi knowledge around this at best. And yeah, there was a lot of failure with it, just a lot of problems. Something came up and I wanted to ask you, it's a bit of a curveball question here, but where do you get, or where do you see, where have you seen kind of the best return on investment? So if I'm looking at the aspects in a warehouse, I receive some stuff, I put some stuff away, I pick some stuff, I count some stuff, I ship some stuff, and maybe I move some things to one bin location or another. Where do you think a good warehouse management software package gives that client a good return, a quick return on investment? I guess that's the best way to put it. So.
Sure. A big part of it is the visibility of inventory.
Yeah.
When you go to barcoding and you get into that mindset, you're looking and you're paying attention to every physical container in the business. And the reason I say that is from the ERP standpoint, a lot of times you deal with like logical buckets of inventory.
Right.
I know I have 7 pallets in the warehouse. I don't know where each of those 7 are necessarily that way, or if it's a fuzzy process, or what's on those. When you get into a warehouse management system, now you can get down with barcoding and paying a lot of attention to that. You've scanned it in and out of places explicitly versus someone telling you that it's over here in this aisle somewhere, right? Oh, it's in this location, but realistically they put it to the next one over, which can still happen, but it's less likely when you're scanning, especially when you pay attention to the placement of barcodes. So that really improves a lot of them.
Sure.
And then as far as it gets rid of a lot of the physical counts, those really expensive, let's stop everything and go from one wall to the next, making sure we know what we have in here. Do we have shrink? Do we have swell? If you're getting in with a good warehouse management system and you utilize cycle counting on a recurring basis, you never have to stop the facility again. So there's the downtime piece goes away. So, right there, instant labor savings in a lot of ways.
Totally. No, I couldn't agree more. I think that is one that, the flexibility of being able to count inventory when you want to, not when you have to stop the processes.
Right. That kind of leads me right into a lot of very capable warehouse management systems embrace this concept of tasks. So the more you can interleave those, the less travel you have from all the people on the floor working. So you cross-train to an extent. And they can do meaningful work pretty much anywhere they are in a warehouse versus the old adage of I have paper and I'm walking back to some central location to find out what I'm doing next or if information changed. You have that process on a mobile device. I can now get this next piece of work. The system knows I can do it. That's the caveat there.
Of course.
But then I can do something on my way back, and I'm always doing something productive for the facility. And you can incentivize around there. There's lots of cool things, but right there, that gets rid of a lot of the bobcatting where you basically just have your truck and there's no trailer on it and you're spending all this time to drive the resources to get to where it is.
Right.
There's a lot of that effectively in warehouses when you're paper based effectively. So that's another one that's pretty big. It's a hard cultural shift in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But if you can make it and you communicate the positives about it, it's a big one there too.
Gotcha. So Casey, how does somebody engage with your company? How do they find you?
I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. I'm engaging with folks. I write there. I share my thoughts. I'm getting into more video slowly when doing podcasts.
Slowly but surely, you're rolling through.
So that's where you can engage with me, the private messages, you can interact with posts, but that's the big place that I do hang out.
Yeah, we'll make sure that in the show notes that, we have links to the LinkedIn profile. And I definitely want people to find you before they make the big plunge and the big mistake. I mean, I hate to tell tales out of school, but we had a $500,000 boat anchor, man. Don't want to see people do that. I want them to, actually go through this process and, work with somebody like you so they can actually get what they paid for, really get the best out of the implementation. So, well, man, I truly appreciate you sharing this stuff with us. And, it is kind of fun. As I said, this is one of my favorite subjects because I love this. It's not an if thing for most distributors. It's a when thing. And I think these systems are getting so much more affordable that, it's not just the big kids that get to play in this neighborhood.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
It really comes down to, I know distributors that are $7 million in revenue that have invested in this type of technology.
They typically get into it earlier because it's the bread and butter, right?
Yeah.
If it's moving inventory, I need to have a system right here, a very capable one.
Yeah.
I get one in, I can scale up.
Right. You don't have to pay for a whole lot of extra labor.
For sure.
Yeah. Hey, Casey, again, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciated it.
I appreciate it too. This was fun. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider sharing with your friends and colleagues. And don't forget to follow the show on your favorite podcast application. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by the brilliant team at the Creative Impostor Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, the Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.